completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we have a repeat guest. Ben Moss is on. And we're going to be talking, this show in particular is not going to be all rainbows and unicorns. We're going to be talking, what is the saying, drain the swamp? We're going to be talking about the negative things in ufology today. And I hope that, by the end of the show we can say some positive things and come up with some ideas in the future that will help as we move forward. I've been doing this show now. It's coming up in 6 years. I can't believe it. And I still don't know anything more than I knew when I started. I was criticized for that recently, and that's okay, because I don't pretend to know anything. Just here exploring, basically. So we have Alejandro Rojas will be coming back next week. He is on the plane now, flying home from Budapest. I don't know if any of you follow him on Facebook, but he was posting some awesome pictures, and it'll be good to have him back in town. So our guest, Ben Moss, like I said, he's been on with Tony Angiola a number of times, and he's MUFON's chief field investigator in Virginia, and he's also part of the Strike Team Area Research or STAR Team, and he's been on History Channel's Hangar One and a lot of other shows, Paranormal TV, and on and on. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
I should say welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about, some of the issues that are happening in the UFO field in general. And I know there was, you wanted to get some things off of your chest. You wanted to talk about it a little bit as well. But for the person that's not familiar with you, that hadn't seen you on before, can you give a little bit of your background and what got you interested in the topic to begin with?
My dad was interested in UFOs, and when I was a little kid, I remember climbing up on the bed and watching the Walter Cronkite special about UFOs. It was kind of a skeptical show, and we did post that on our MUFON VA website, but that got me going, and then I was pretty much hooked from that point forward to the point where all the kids in the neighborhood were throwing Frisbees up, taking pictures of it, and claiming we saw a flying saucer.
So, how did you get involved in all the investigating and all that in MUFON? What started that course?
That was in the 90s. I joined MUFON and went to a conference, and then I got interested in becoming an investigator. And in 1999, I actually ran the security for the one at Crystal City. That was really well attended. I think 700 or 800 people were there. And then, after doing, about 40 or 50 investigations, Sue Switek, our state director, promoted me to chief field investigator. And I've been disseminating and working cases ever since. The more I've done, the more I've gotten into it, and it's just escalated from there with everything that's been happening in the last 2 or 3 years. Getting on the show, Hangar One, was a boost because more people just talk to me because they recognize me. So it's one of those things that the more you do, the more people you meet, the more people that want to talk to you, and it just snowballs from there.
Now, Hangar One had a little bit of controversy too. People were in the UFO field were saying, it's not so good or exaggerated. What did you think in general of the show? Or can you set yourself aside and look at it, or is it just a biased opinion, the only way you can go about something like that?
Well, I remember the kind of the Blue Book show that was on in the past, and the one with Robert Stack, and it was less fanfare and more following cases that MUFON actually investigated. So I think when you take a lot of the wow out of the shows and have this really slick presentation, that's what people are used to, and there are other shows that do it that way. The History Channel show was pretty accurate. There was a little bit of embellishment here and there, but I thought they did a good job with the stories. We just had several of us just didn't like the one about the Mars tale. That's a whole other story. But taking the cases that they picked, and those were selected by Jeremy Ray and some other people kind of helped with that. But they picked really good cases. I thought they did a good job. They didn't change what really happened in the case because they're so unusual to begin with. You don't have to add special effects and all these aftermarket things to make this thing look better. The stories are pretty fascinating as they are, but I thought they did a good job. I mean, there were certain topics that we got on. They were a little bit out there, but the cases were pretty well represented. So, and I'm trying not to be biased about it, but if I wasn't on the show, I still would have watched the show. I watch almost all the UFO shows, the good ones and the bad ones, and you can learn something from all of them. Right.
Now, okay, that MUFON's been, under scrutiny over the last year, and all the way from the guests at their last symposium kind of being out there a bit or a bit fringy to the issue with John Ventry. I figured we could just talk about it all tonight, get it all off our chest and see if we still have a show by next week.
Well, that when John Ventry posted that I guess you would call it a rant. I actually called him up and told him, because I know John. I told him, I said, you should probably think about stepping down because that's where everything's going to lead to eventually. And then MUFON had kind of a halfway response, and then kind of got backlash. Social media is funny because they'll jump on anything, to get the ball rolling. But there were some things said that most people wouldn't agree with because they were, fairly inflammatory and racist. And so, it's just one of those things where guilt by association, and Jan maybe could have done a better job of just jumping on it right away. Because when I talked to John before he actually got let go completely, I said, this is going to end with you leaving your position one way or another. So it was just one of those things that a lot of people were waiting to jump on MUFON, and that was a good catalyst. But in the last symposium that I was at in Las Vegas, there were some topics that, it's like I've said before, if you had a symposium of scientific data and white papers, you'd probably have about 50 attendees, and they'd all be scientists. If you have a show about, trips to Mars with Ross Perot and going back in time and time regression and dinosaurs on Mars, then you're going to have 700 or 800 people show up, which is exactly what happened.
Go ahead.
The one thing I wanted to add to that was just my observation, because I was talking to a lot of people, but, you got a lot of people that criticize MUFON from the computer screen, and, everybody's, very brave behind a computer screen, but there's so many people that come to this conference from far away, from other countries, that are in walkers and wheelchairs and respirators. And, if some of the people that criticize MUFON would just get out and maybe come to one of the symposiums and meet some people, you might have a bigger picture, a bigger understanding of all the people involved in that. So, it's easy to jump on something if you're not involved in it. You don't know the inner workings of it. It's another thing if you're part of it and you can see all the different clashes going on and what's going on behind the scenes. But, kudos to people that make it there that probably haven't left their house in a year. I mean, the average age at a conference is certainly over 45.
Yeah.
And, it's just tough. It's easy to throw out barbs from a computer screen, but, do something about it.
I like Jan Harzen, and I don't know if you caught Kevin Randall's interview with him, but he asked him, some pretty strong questions, about the people that donate the $5,000 or more that get into the inner circle, and what type of information they get. I thought that was interesting. I had no idea about that part of it.
I did hear that, and it was, it was interesting, like you said.
Yeah. Now, I think I might also get my rants over with.
Let's hear it.
Okay, and I got to tell you, every time I rail against Dr. Stephen Greer, I lose support. I lose supporters. I get nasty emails from some people. I understand why people are attracted to his charisma, and he seems, in general, he seems like a nice guy. And I'm going to say some positive things as well as the things that really upset me about what he has been doing. And, the last two movies, Sirius and Unacknowledged, I don't know if you caught that. Did you happen to catch that? You did.
Yeah, I've seen it.
The Sirius one I thought was a total ego thing, basically the bottom line is the Atacama, as I call it, the baby alien there, ended up, with human DNA.
Right.
So if you watched Unacknowledged, then you'll see that in this show he also talks about that. Let's see, I have a quote here. I wrote the quote down. And basically that, of course, the alien, body is most likely not human. So he's still hanging on to that. And I think I liken him a little bit to a cult leader because he has these very, very strong followers that will attack you if you say anything negative about him. And I really would have to say that he's probably one of the biggest charlatans of our time in the UFO field. And I think he's in it only for the money. It's kind of like a rock star. It takes a while to get to the very top, and you make a lot of money. In the UFO field, there's hardly any money made by anybody. But if you're at the very top, you can make some money.
Right.
And the way you make money is not necessarily through fame of, say, television shows or movies or anything like that, but a lot
certainly
of times
not that way.
Donations. His website is totally set up for donations. I have to say, Unacknowledged was very well done. It was nice music, absolutely fantastic editing, some great UFO clips. I really thought he did have. There was a couple in there that have been proven wrong, hoaxes and things. But for the most part, the clips that he had in there were really good video clips of UFOs, I thought. Okay, so here's a couple things. It really baffled me that Richard Doty in the Paul Benowitz case was talking about aliens and about, the ones that he saw and things like that. I don't know where that came from. I don't know how much you know about Richard Doty, but I was kind of shocked to hear him talk about that. What did you think of that?
Yeah, Doty has that terrible history with Linda Moulton Howe and Paul Benowitz, and it's just you never know what's the truth and what's made up and what's conjecture and what's because I know Dr. Greer has been caught with that dinner table talk about some type of revelation when the guy said he was just being cordial. So I don't believe I've met Stephen Greer, and I never try to talk about somebody's character that I haven't met. But like we said before, a red flag to me is if you're generating income by taking people out on trips to see things. You've got to produce, and so if you're in this for money, there's something you have to keep doing to produce money, and it's dangling that carrot right in front of you, just out of reach, so you never really catch it because there's no carrot. So the whole thing is that I think the best thing he ever did was definitely when all the people came together at the press club in Washington, D.C.
Absolutely.
That was a great presentation. That's a great way to do things, but everything else around it just has, is a big red flag to me. Richard Doty, definitely was lying about a lot of things, admitted he was lying, to send people down the rabbit hole. I just think there's a lot of misdirection here, but underlying it all, there's there's not anything of substance. If you have proof that you're calling down UFOs, where are the videos? Where's the electromagnetic readings? Where's the gravitometer, the magnetometer, the daylight? All of that. It's just not there. And this constant need for donations and things. If it's about the money, you're going to find ways to get money. And it's probably not the way to investigate UFOs, because UFOs take you where they want to take you. You can't pigeonhole them and then, command them to come down, command them to be in a certain spot at a certain time. So I just, it just leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, he was charging people, I forget what the fee was, at one of those, sighting, whatever they called, sighting, sky watches. He was charging them so much a piece to take a picture in this UFO that nobody could see. I don't know if you heard about that or not.
Yeah.
So one of the parts in the movie, he starts sobbing, and I'm a guy, and, I can sob too. I understand that. But I think it was theatrical, and basically it was about his coming of age as a young doctor and it being briefed by the CIA director, that's Woolsey, who, again, he never spoke, no one thinks he really had meetings with him. But he started sobbing about that because he had to, according to him, the president and the CIA director were being lied to, and they came to him, and that's what he was sobbing about, is they came to him so he could help them. Right. And then also he said that there's a bullet in this room with everyone's name on it, and if what you say here goes out of this room, that bullet will find you. That type of thing. I think and people are buying into it. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of upsetting. I think it hurts the UFO field. And then he gets into the free energy part. He has this thing called the New Earth Incubator. He has a funding project on his website. He needs to raise $100 to $200 million, and you're welcome to donate as much as you possibly can. So,
well, that's just, if anybody had a free energy device, you would patent it, you would go public, you would make the money without needing to ask for it. Or on the other end, the big oil would have you rubbed out or something. But I just don't see it. It's just like with a lot of the claims of people that are really outlandish. If you cannot prove something and your only source of verification is everybody else saying the same thing, then you don't have any verification.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I got a call from Lee Spiegel. He had a pre-screening of the movie several months ago, and he called me and said the thing that upset him the most is 2 times in the movie they say that J. Allen Hynek was heading Project Blue Book. That really upset him for some reason.
Well, that's a big flaw.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't caught. But anyway, so that's all I have to say. Like I said, I understand why people have the attraction to Stephen Greer. He seems really honest, and like you said, I really do commend him for the way he started. It's just too bad. I think he took a fork in the road because that was a really big deal, the thing he did back in, what year was that? Do you remember? It was going way back.
Was it 99? Somewhere around there? Maybe 2000? I was there. I just can't remember.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
I was there. I was standing in the back.
Yeah.
I mean, if the goal is to uncover the mystery of what UFOs are, that's one thing. If the goal is to make an income and generate, a salary each year, then that's just not going to work. The two don't go together.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have. It's like I know you feel the same way as I do. I do this for a passion. I don't do it for. Obviously, I don't do it for money. That's not what I'm looking for. Otherwise, I would have quit a long time ago when the costs started rising on my, my server and stuff like that. Someone brought up Meyer. Billy Meyer, that's another. There was a Billy Meyer UFO shot. It was one of the clips in Greer's movie, which I was kind of surprised.
Right.
most of those are hoaxes. I get contacted by Michael Horn. Is it Michael
Right.
Horn?
Yeah.
Several times a year wanting to be on my show, and I don't know, I just can't have him on the show. So we get into it each time, and I just say, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I don't trust anything that Billy Meyer, maybe Billy Meyer did have some sightings at one time, possibly, but, so many of the things are proven hoaxes. And it's another thing where the government comes in, and changes things according to them.
Right. Yeah. Billy Meyer is another person that found an avenue towards making money. And almost every decent photo that I've seen has been broken down to show models and, tape coming off of some of the motherships and, things that people have pointed out, and a lot of people have even better knowledge about. But it's kind of like the Dan Fry and a lot of these guys back in the day. I haven't seen anything real that Billy Meyer, and that's probably going to upset a lot of people. But when you really do the homework and dig into it, there's so much. An example is the one thing I remember clearly was a UFO that goes around a tree in his field. And this guy goes out there and says, there's no tree there, and that's when we found out that he was growing these little Japanese trees and probably inserted that into the video and with a small model made it look like a giant oak tree or something. So
that's right. Yeah.
You shoot yourself in the foot once and your credibility is down the tubes pretty quickly.
Yeah,
at least with most people that do their homework. Well,
if any part of something is faked, then the credibility of the whole situation. I'm a fine arts appraiser, and that's how I have to look at something. Unfortunately, and what I do is guilty till proven innocent instead of the other way around. So if you see like a house that has one fake in it, then you really have to be careful and with everything you're appraising. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel about things like the MJ12 documents, for instance.
Yeah.
I know Stan Friedman. I have a lot of respect for Stan Friedman. Really like him a lot. But I know he believes that there are a few that are correct. And to me, it could be a campaign of disinformation to mix them in and have people not believe in it. I can understand that could possibly happen, but I question those. What do you think about the whole MJ12 situation?
It's probably sandwiched around some type of real document, but I've looked at these extensively. The first red flag is anonymous mail sent to Jamie Shandera. So you have an anonymous source. You can't verify anything from that source. Then you have some flaws in the documents. That one with the Harry Truman signature looks like a precise copy from a real document. And, is it magic? Is it MJ12? I mean, when you kind of dig back into that, there's a lot of problems. I know that Stanton has addressed some of the issues with fonts and things like that, but I think it's probably disinformation built around some truth, like legends, or have a little bit of basis of truth. But look at the rabbit hole that sent a lot of people down. Look at the time and resources to investigate that. If it is kind of made up around maybe some real document, they did their job. They took people off the path, and they've spent 20 years analyzing these things because they came out in, 89?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
If it is fake, look at all the wasted time and money and documents and presentations. And, it's just crazy.
Well, think of the time that Stan himself has in that, these trips to Washington. Luckily someone funded him for doing that, but just the time involved, and I'm sure he enjoyed it too, but still, that was really something.
Yeah, and he likes digging through the archives.
Right. I had mentioned to him on my show that I had at an auction house, a former CIA agent retired. His estate was there, and I found MJ12 documents in his footlocker. Huh. Or I didn't. The auctioneer did. But, there are copies, the same copies that are floating all around, and who knows why he had them. But I don't think it's anything serious,
right.
Yeah. So just before we keep our rants going here, I'm going to ask you a question or two that came in
sure.
for you. In your opinion, do you think, this is actually from Carrie in the forum, and do you think that Bob Bigelow has been given any information from the government as a precursor to finding out the truth, especially with the money he has spent on investigating this topic?
Well, Bob Bigelow, he did have access to some of the close cases at MUFON, and he paid for that access. But he, I believe, from my understanding, and he's a smart guy, I had given him kudos for coming out with what he said on national news about alien presence, but he was looking for propulsion evidence, pretty much so, because he wants to put hotels in space and do a lot of things like Elon Musk is doing, where space is the next frontier. So if by studying some of these really good evidential MUFON cases, you can learn something about the propulsion, which is what all has been trying to do, especially recently, that is the reason why he dug into it. My understanding was, if he could get some material, he could understand what these things are made of, how they're withstanding the pressures of space. If he could figure out some of the propulsion characteristics of how, if something 2 miles wide or long is sitting in the atmosphere, the amount of energy required to keep it in one place is just amazing. So, I think he was trying to get an inside look at what he could do to help with his programs in space. And he might have gotten some data. I don't know. A lot of what he did is kind of not out in the public right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want... I know you had some other topics you wanted to talk about, but I can go into... I only have 2 rants to make. Not really. I have a few more, but still, I don't have too much. But I remember when we initially put this show together, you said you wanted to, get some things off your chest. So a lot of the social media attacks, and people have attacked me, and that's fine. I don't mind. But, this whole thing about the scientific study of UFOs, which MUFON is kind of steered away from a little bit, there's a point there, and there's a point for both sides. But there's so many videos and things that pop up online, and I'll go in and say, CGI or, fake, inserted image, and I'll just get hammered. How do you know that? You're just, it's got to be a MUFON case for you to agree with it. And I'm like, no. The key thing for a lot of these things that are being posted online is there any evidence of anomalous movement or propulsion? And just like the Chilean video that, was found to be an airplane that was so far away it just wasn't showing up on the radar, and it was hitting a condensation level of 30,000 feet and was shooting the plume out the back, which in infrared was black and looked weird, but, that was not anomalous at all. It was an airplane. It was flying in a straight line. It had a plume come out, and people didn't realize it was being filmed in infrared, so they thought, wow, that's ejecting material. It's some type of exotic craft. So one of my big rants that I try not to go into too deeply is the fact that people will see a video and then repost it on Facebook or wherever and say it's the greatest UFO video ever when it shows none of the characteristics of things we look for. And it goes down the line of a lot of things out in the public now, the Nazca mummies and, the 3-fingered alien and all these things that have no backing, no scientific background to them. It's kind of gotten, the one thing social media has done is you can take a subject and run with it in such a direction that it's like flat earthers, I just can't believe that people think the earth is still flat. It's just amazing to me, some of the things that are posted. So one thing that I'm trying to get to in my rant here is that if people do a little bit more homework, they would understand what the difference is between what we're looking for and all the fakes and the sites like Secure Team 6 or Secure Team 10, which, you got to pay to watch these videos, which are probably created by people just for that show and there's nothing real about them. So you have to kind of have a discerning eye, especially in the media. We've always had to have that, but in social media also. Right. Yeah. Social media is a whole different animal. It adds a whole different thing to this. And, there is a want to believe, I think, in a lot of this. I totally get that. And like my son says, if aliens didn't exist, it would be a lot more boring, or the possibility of them not existing. and so I get all that, but once things start rolling, they're on like a freight train. It can't almost unstoppable. Once something is bought into, and people are just looking at the surface, and it's what happens though in situations like this is if someone is thinking about really looking into the topic and excited about it, and they right off the bat find out the first thing they really thought was real. Like I remember years ago watching the alien autopsy and thinking, "Oh my God, what is that?"
Yep.
But so many people get burned. They get burned by the experience once they realize that it was a hoax, and then they no longer want anything to do with the topic. When there's some perfectly good information and real hard work out there.
Yeah, and for some people, they just can't let go of something that's been proven to not be true. It's sad because it's like the Billy Meyer and people like that, where you can pretty much show that there's a lot of hoaxing going on. It's hard for people to let go of something they believed in. I've had some things where I thought were really great cases and true, and then I found out otherwise, and I'm like, oh, gosh, how did I get fooled? So, one of the lessons is be careful what you say, especially on social media, because it's permanent. It's out there forever. It can be witnessed by 7 billion people. So with a lot of these things, it's best to do your due diligence, your homework, and kind of get an idea of what makes something anomalous and unusual and a UFO, and what is a fake CGI, man-made, atmospheric phenomena or weather-related. Because just as an example, when we had Jupiter and Saturn really close in the sky a couple of years ago, and I went out and looked at it, it looked really weird, but I knew the configuration was there. We got about 10, 15 UFO reports about that. And, it looked like they were dancing in the sky. But if you realize that as two planets were close together, you have that diffraction of the atmosphere where stars look like they twinkle because of all the stuff you're looking through. It looked really strange. But if you knew that event was happening, you'd realize, hey, that's really cool looking, but that's Jupiter and Saturn. So it's one of those things where, like I've said before, you have to kind of know a little bit about many different sciences to really look at this with kind of a trained eye, I would guess, and look at it so that you're not fooled. Know a little bit about meteorology, a little bit about astronomy, a little bit about what's in the sky where. Use some of the apps on your phone. Those are all things that will help you. It's like a case we went on once where the woman said she saw UFOs constantly over her house, and when we were there, I was using my Flight Trader app. I'm like, that's a flight out of Dulles. No, that's a flight going to Chicago, and every single thing she thought was a UFO was a flight. So. I guess it's easy to be fooled because of so many shows now that talk about UFOs, fiction and reality, or kind of reality shows, that I think some of the old great works in ufology are not being seen by this new generation that's coming up. Some of the greatest books, that really got into it and did a good job of talking about it and explaining things and looking at cases and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I titled this show The Elephant in the Ufologist's Living Room or something along those lines. And so, I thought we could touch on some controversial subjects that no one would really want to talk about. And one of those things is the Stan Romanek child pornography case. I don't know if anyone followed that or not, but that did, he did one count. Was acquitted. He was acquitted of one account, but not. He was also, found guilty on not dispersing but owning, child pornography, which, that's attacking him as a character. Me talking about perhaps, but they said that they wanted to bring ufology into the courtroom, and the reason they wanted to do that. Now, obviously, I didn't hear anything about it. I guess the lawyer was smart enough to say, don't go there. But they were going to accuse the government of coming in, and because of Stan's knowledge of all these beings and things like that, the government planted the child porn on his, on his computer. so that's the part that I'm upset about, is that, what type of information does he think he has that he's not been able to prove to the world that the government would actually do something like that to discredit him? That's kind of the thought I have on that. And I also communicated with Lisa Romanek. I just said, I hope you're doing okay, and I hope that I hope you get help, because I know denial is a really, a strong coping mechanism. Yep. And so I received some, total denial response back to that. Quite a few. She wrote me several times. But just saying that he's 100% innocent, that's... So, I basically ended my conversation with her. If you're sitting alone and deep in your thoughts, you feel he's innocent, then maybe you're right. Right. So what else can you say?
I was looking at that for years now. I was always interested in what he was filming and all, but there's two sides of that. Either he loaded that on his computer or was put on his computer. If one or the other is true, then you have two different conversations. If he was onto something, which I don't know if he was, and they planted it on there, well, wow, what a way to ruin somebody's life. If he had it on there, that he put it on there himself, I mean, why would you, if you're having this kind of scrutiny going on because you're investigating things that maybe somebody doesn't want you to investigate, why in the world would you have something like that on your computer? And I think it was found in the closet of his house. The whole thing just sounds really strange. Not knowing or being able to get to the truth of the matter, I don't know Stan, so I can't say that he's this person he's being portrayed in the media. It just seems very convenient that they found all this material, and that somebody that seems as smart as he is would have that sitting on a computer, because it's crazy. It's just, I don't understand the whole thing about that, but it's something that I couldn't really say one way or another, because I don't know. If they planted on his computer, then we're all wrong, and if they didn't, then what a shame, what a terrible thing. Either way, it is a tragedy. Yes. Either scenario is terrible. It is terrible.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know the guy, so I can't tell you that. Oh, yeah, he did it. That wouldn't be fair.
Well, 3 years ahead of that, of them, arresting him initially, they had seen the activity going on, but they didn't have anything in place to move forward with it. They didn't have a cyber porn, investigation team or anything like that. But they knew the activity was going on, several years ahead of time.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I just wouldn't. Yeah, I would hate to conjecture something that's not true, not correct, or or I'm totally wrong about it. And it's not fair to that person. They're going through their own little hell right now.
How I feel about that, I'm sure it is hell. He's not going to spend any jail time on it, but how I feel about that is, he had choices, and also when he went to court, he had 12 peers that were in the jury box that found him guilty. So it's how our court systems work. But I don't think there is any big conspiracy about it myself.
Yeah.
But I will say this: because of the following that Stan has, he has so much support. Him and Lisa as well. They have all these people are just pouring out their support to them, and all believing that he was framed.
Yeah, I mean the 12 jury. We have the OJ trial, so I'm not sure if that means they were accurate. So
yeah,
I just it's just without knowing that he could be a really good guy that's been screwed somehow, or somebody else could have done that. I don't know, but there's nothing I can really say about that, because unless you're him or your close friend, you don't know what the whole scenario was. And that's kind of scary, because there have been a high incidence of UFO researchers passing away. Hopefully that's just a coincidence and not something, but you just never know. I don't think that any of us can get close enough to any material that would make them want to do something drastic like that. I mean, sure, you might film a black project that's not where it's supposed to be, which I think has happened with some of these triangular craft, and then you get a little grief about that. But other than that, I don't see, unless something lands in your yard that's extraterrestrial, I don't see how you're going to get a hold of any information without hacking something. Just in regular investigations, that's going to cause a three-letter agency to come down on you. I've always said that, as a member of MUFON, as an investigator, we're all on the list somewhere. They know who we are, I'm sure, but I don't think we're a threat to uncover a free energy device or anything like that.
Well, Dr. Stephen Greer does have bodyguards, so.
And he's developed a flux capacitor. So.
That's what it is.
Just put a little, trash in there, and it'll fire up and power your house.
In his movie Unacknowledged, he has this. I remember when this came out, the guy was powering his car with water. Do you remember that? And whatever happened? I remember
this
is not a UFO topic, but whatever happened to that?
75 mile an hour 75 miles per gallon carburetor guy that disappeared. I mean, there have been people that have developed supposedly engines that run very efficiently, and then you don't hear from them again. The one on water, I know that when right before the Segway came out, that people were wondering if that was a flying device. When that patent finally came out, it was actually just something you rode around on. But it's conspiracy theories. I don't know I think if something would run on water, it'd have to convert it somehow into something else and then back again. But there's so many good scientists out there. I think somebody would have stumbled on that again if somebody had perfected it once. But I haven't seen any evidence of that.
Right. Another question in the forum is from Carrie is, as part of your investigative role in MUFON, have you ever seen evidence from a witness or via a scientific source that for one reason or another has not been disclosed to the public but has convinced you of something otherworldly?
Oh, yeah, we both have seen that. I would say that our buddy, Mr. Stanford, has strong evidence of that. Some of the things that Ray has shared and he shared with others definitely show technology in our atmosphere that I don't think came from this world. I'm not one to jump on the bandwagon and immediately say if it's not from here, it's ET. It could be a lot of other possibilities, but that would make sense. It's just like if we find there was life on Mars or Europa or anywhere else in our solar system, then mathematically life is everywhere. Then the possibility that something might be monitoring us because we're about to travel space and we're warlike could be possible. We could have people or civilizations visiting us because they want to keep an eye on us because we're starting to travel space and we have atomic bombs and we kill each other. But a lot of what Ray Stanford has shown me and Tony and we've seen very fascinating things. There's other evidence I've seen. We're doing our talk at Mysteries of Space and Sky about propulsion, and when you do a talk about UFO propulsion, it's all speculation and what you can gather from the available data. But even with the eclipse in '91 in Mexico, with that silver disc that was filmed by I think 8 or 9 different people, it wasn't the planet Venus, but it did show a purple plasma flowing behind it as it moved through space, and that I've seen that in many other videos that I think are real anomalous objects. So personally, I've seen several videos and even photographs that I think are showing a non-terrestrial technology, and our conclusion on the Socorro case that we're still working on is that thing wasn't built by anyone on this planet because nobody has come forward and answered the White House, the Pentagon, the CIA, and Blue Book to say, yeah, we built that, we flew it. That never happened. So when you eliminate all the possibilities, you get to that point where you have to accept the only remaining answer. And for Socorro, it was that we can't find any evidence that anybody built that thing or that that technology even exists today. So it was probably a non-terrestrial craft that landed at Lonnie's and Marsaw.
Yes, I know you're in touch with Ray a lot, and I hear from him. I don't know, 2 or 3 times a month. So I'm hoping that he's digging and keeps digging till he finds the original negative of that image of the craft when he took a shot, over at the dynamite shack.
Yeah, it's a fascinating picture. I think he's looking hard, and just like I told Ray, I don't think anybody grabbed it. I think that only Ray knows where things are in Ray's house, and it's just he's probably put it somewhere where he hadn't found it yet. But yeah, that's something that's interesting because when James Fox told me he had visited in Socorro, and there were apparently Lonnie Zamora had been sent pictures of that craft that other people had taken, but all the pictures were missing. So that's another part of the aspect of the investigation is we're still trying to find somebody else that might have taken a photograph of a craft like that, because we did find about 8 or 9 points from that Highway 60 West, which we traveled from from Socorro to Scottsdale when we saw you last at the UFO Congress in Arizona. There were about 8 or 9 places where that craft was sighted. Apparently there was a landing at Hollerman. There was another landing in Socorro. So out of those 8 touches where that thing was seen and possibly photographed, hopefully there's another photograph out there somewhere so we can do some cross-referencing on that.
Right. Speaking of the Phoenix conference we were both at, I believe that was the year where they had the hybrids, right?
That was Jacques Vallée was there, right? Or was that the year after?
I think so. Anyway.
2013, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, when we're talking about the hybrids, I do have to say that you talked about earlier, if it was all science, nobody would be there, 15 people would be there. Well, these people that were claiming to be hybrids, they showed up, and they showed drawings of their alien selves, not pictures, but drawings. And it was kind of, sort of comical in a way to watch this. And, there was some tears shed, but I'll tell you, they got a standing ovation. It was the most fringe topic of the conference, and they got a standing ovation. So it kind of goes to show what people want. I think that's what it is.
Some people want to believe so badly. I remember that I had a person, I won't give more detail on that, but came up to me in Arizona and grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me and was going, "You have to believe that I've been abducted." And was totally, crying and about an inch from my face. And I was like, I had to finally say, and Tony, passed this person off to me as they went to him first. So thanks, Tony. But anyway, I said, I believe that you believe that happened, so, I'd give you a little bit of, relax a little bit. I believe that you believe that happened, but, the almost fanaticism of some people, it's like the theory that they're going to be here to save us, that's just, you just can't buy into that. It's a phenomenon that's happening. We're investigating it, but, when it comes to hybrids and, abduction, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, but it could be happening. It's just very hard to prove. It's like a lot of things. You have some really good stories, some very interesting stories, but they're still stories. Usually you don't have any physical evidence. You don't have a neighbor that saw it. Sometimes you do, but it's tough to get just trying to figure out what UFOs are. I try not to branch off into all the other things that are going on because it's too distracting and it's less and less evidence the further you get away from just trying to figure out what's flying around the sky. So I try to focus on that. But when it comes to a lot of the spiritual side of it, the Palladians and the reptilians and all of that, I don't buy into that. I really don't.
Well, I was on the fence. There are some cases that I think are very convincing. But I was on the fence about, abductions in general. At first, at first I didn't think it was happening at all. And then I thought, well, if UFOs are here and if it's a possibility that at least some of them are extraterrestrial, I could see that something could be happening, or at least they'd be, doing some research while they're here. They wouldn't just fly over and fly back, I don't think, unless that's the way they wanted to observe. But I think that it's possible that something's happening, but and that some things have happened to some people,
Yeah. That being said, I mean, I know Travis Walton. I've talked to him several times. I've talked to him personally, and I believe his story. I mean, I think that something extraordinary happened there. All the people, even the guys that were with him that didn't want to talk, have all come forward. They've all corroborated everybody's story. And it's very interesting because, these guys were all up for murder for about 4 or 5 days because they thought they'd killed Travis.
Yeah.
Everything about that story is backed up by evidence. And even in the great movie that Jennifer Stein did called Travis, the fact that the tree rings facing the event where that, I guess it was some type of radioactivity where the ship came down and zapped Travis, that the tree rings are growing more in that in towards that event, and the only parallel study that they could find that showed the same thing was in Chernobyl. The tree rings accelerated towards radiation. So there are cases like that. Betty and Barney Hill, not sure about that. That seems pretty fascinating too. So there are, like you said, there are some cases that make you go, wow. And it's just like this whole phenomena. You get some of these cases, if they're true, they're so strange that it kind of makes sense that if there is an advanced civilization visiting us, like I think Carl Sagan or maybe Arthur C. Clarke said, it would look like magic. And that's exactly what, with some of these cases, you're like, what the heck? It just sounds so strange, but it kind of makes sense that it would sound strange because it's alien, or at least it's non-terrestrial. So that's a conundrum.
Now you're bringing me back to the unacknowledged movie that Stephen Greer had, and that is he mentions Carl Sagan. Now, Carl Sagan did have some interest in possible visitation early on. There's an article I have on my website somewhere that he wrote in his younger years. But according to Stephen Greer in that movie, he says that he was blackmailed and threatened to never talk about UFOs. And I want to know, where's the proof of that? I want to know where Stephen Greer got that.
Yeah, the only thing that I know from following the whole Sagan saga is that he was very pro-UFO, and then he totally discounted it. So something changed his mind. He kind of did the opposite of Hynek, but he did have he was very open. He talked about it, and then towards the end, he was really negative. He was very dismissive. So I don't know if what Dr. Greer said is true, but maybe somebody said, look, you're a high-profile guy. You got to tone this down or at least give start to, just like some of the guys that supposedly were in Majestic 12 that were big debunkers, and it turns out they maybe had this secret life, or some of these guys did have an interest in the subject, but in public would just trash it tremendously. And Carl Sagan did a flip, so who knows what that was. As a high-profile guy, it's like, Neil Tyson, if he came out and started talking about UFOs being real, what would be the ramifications? So maybe somebody just nudged him a little bit and said, hey, tone it down or stop talking about it. But, I think once again, it's a story.
Yeah, I think that's highly likely.
Yeah.
What you're saying is seems like it makes the most sense of it all.
Yeah, because he did change his tune. You just have to wonder why. It's not like he got definitive proof that it wasn't true, because the more you dig, just like what happened to Hynek after Socorro and I think the swamp gas case, he started going, well, this is just, it's very fascinating. There's something to this. And so in the really good cases, there's something that's very elusive, but it keeps you going because it's very strange, and maybe there's circumstantial evidence or radioactivity or whatever the case may be that makes you go, that's a very unusual event, and the fact that X number of people saw it and there's this evidence left behind, then you have these things that kind of, like I said, they're very strange, very peculiar, but trying to get a grasp on what's going on has been the crux of ufology ever since we first started doing this.
I know you're familiar with the site, The Angry Ufologist.
Yep.
And because you and I are both members on their Facebook page. That's the reason I know. But anyway, someone in the chat room brought this up, and I know he has an article about it, and that is someone wanted us to talk about the Black Knight satellite. Have you followed any of that?
As far as I can tell, the Black Knight satellite is actually a heat shield that came off that's been definitely, there is a timeline that shows that this heat shield, this thermal type blanket came off and is in space, and it looks really strange, but it's because of the material and the way it's photographed. I think that there is no Black Knight satellite. I think it is some type of debris, like a thermal heat shield from one of the launches. Because depending on whatever altitude, Earth-based telescopes would be able to zoom in on that thing. And the fact that they keep showing up in NASA images, they're not trying to hide it. I mean, the thing has been floating around for a while. I think it's what they said it was, a thermal heat shield.
Well, there's a crazy amount of there's about 500,000 pieces of space junk out there, just orbiting our Earth, which is pretty dangerous for UFOs to come in, Yeah,
I think they have pretty good shields. If you follow the USOs, the underwater submerged objects, the water doesn't seem to affect them at all. So if they're and that's part of the propulsion, I think they surround themselves with some type of static shell or shield that enables them to pass through anything without any resistance.
One of the things that always baffles me about these people that witness a UFO just all of a sudden shooting off like really fast is there's no breaking of the sound barrier. Would that also cover that, with what you're talking about?
Well, yeah. I mean, from the paper that the gentleman wrote after witnessing Ray's film with the beam ahead, it's been shown in the lab that if you shoot energy, it could be plasma or other type of energy, out in front of a craft, it does push the air out of the way. So then you're traveling through that vacuum. You're not breaking the sound barrier because the air's been pushed away. That's very feasible. And all our craft now, our shuttle and everything, has those long nose cones on it that's shooting energy out in front of it to displace the air so that you have much more efficient travel when you don't have to churn through the atmosphere. But anything that's gotten here from somewhere else would have the ability to have figured all that out. I mean, the one thing that I think several of us agree on that Ray has pointed out is if they're manipulating gravity, which I think that's what they're doing, then they can manipulate time and space. And that would explain a lot of the bizarre behavior, being able to shoot across the sky in less than a second. Well, if they have some type of mini wormhole or something that's enabling them to manipulate gravity, then all these things are possible. It would just be amazing to watch. The energy required to do the stuff they do is there. And we're finding out a lot more about gravitational waves and, the fact that there's no such thing as empty space. You have this quantum fluctuation where particles blink in and out of existence, which we never thought happens before, but there's no such thing as empty space. It's filled with quarks and things that come in existence and go out of existence. And now they're saying that maybe that's how the universe started. There was nothing, but out of nothing always comes something. And so from absolutely nothing, the universe was born, which is hard for humans to get their head around, but it's pretty interesting. The more we learn about quantum physics and physics in general, all these things are possible. We just haven't figured them out yet. But if a civilization is 500 years ahead of us, it's going to look one way. But if it's 5,000, 500,000 years ahead of us, it's going to look like magic. It's going to be something that even if one crashed in the desert in 1947 and we broke it apart, we still probably wouldn't know what the heck it was or how it worked.
All right, I've been getting in the chat room, people are a little disappointed that we're not going into more controversy.
Okay.
They came here for it.
Well, the angry ufologists and people, there's some good points made about, where's the science? And the science is not being done in a lot of cases. A lot of the sensational stuff that's up on social media now is sensational. It doesn't have any proof, it doesn't have any evidence, but it sounds great. Hey, we had a 3-fingered alien from Peru. Sure you do. It's the kind of thing that people want to be real, want to have that tangible evidence, but when you dig into stories like that, man, it all falls apart. It's just...
What is the status?
I've got a lot of grief about that.
Yeah, what is the status of that? I haven't heard anything about it lately. From what I've seen is, and the first thing I asked Ray about it, and he said, well, that culture didn't use plaster in that time frame. He knew that right away. And that's come up. And the fact that the hand is missing certain bones, it wouldn't even function the way the x-rays show. Another guy pointed out that in 1997, one of these same mummies was presented
with its head up, and the new mummy is the same one, but its head is down. He said probably in shame for being presented as an alien. But even the real scientists there said it's theft, it's graveyard theft. You've taken bones that are going to carbon date to that right time frame, but you've taken graves and you've reconstructed bones in such a way to make it look anomalous, and then you covered it in plaster to muddy everything else up. Everything I've seen from that case, because the scientists and doctors that those guys were promoting, I looked into the colleges and the scientific institutions, and none of them existed. I couldn't find anything on Google for half these scientists. I couldn't even find them. But the real people that are the real scientists in Nazca, that are the archaeologists and all, they are saying that it's grave robbery. There's nothing true about it. So I haven't seen one shred of evidence out of this whole thing that shows me that it's nothing but cobbled together bones from the poor people whose graves have been taken out. It's just from day one I didn't believe it, and I still don't believe it. And there's nothing that's come out that shows me there's anything anomalous about it. But hey, for $50, maybe you can watch all the videos. It's just another. Hopefully not a Roswell slide fiasco again.
Well, that's it for our free part of the show. If you want to listen to full shows and the archives on your media player, all you have to do is donate $2 or more per month. All that information's on Podcast UFO. And we'll be back next week with Michael Halpern. It's going to be a different time if you want to watch live, and that's at 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, so remember to keep your eyes to the sky.